Okay, let's try and unpack this. I want you to imagine a figure who embodies the most, I don't know, the most terrifying paradox you can possibly think of. Like, really picture this. On one side of the coin, you have a man who stood before thousands of people and claimed to be the ultimate moral authority on the planet.
And we're not talking about some self-help guru or life coach.
Right, no. I'm talking about titles like prophet, seer, and revelator. A man who, for his followers, literally held the keys to heaven and to hell.
Right, and then you just flip that coin over, and on the other side, you have a man who, at the absolute height of his infamy, held a spot on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list.
That's not a list you get on for, bouncing a check.
Not at all. We're talking about being right there on the poster, the one in the post office, alongside terrorists, cartel leaders, and murderers.
It feels like those two realities shouldn't exist in the same universe, let alone in the same human being.
But they do.
But they do. And today, we are diving deep into the life and, I guess, the crimes of Warren Jeffs, the president of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS.
It's a name that I think a lot of people probably recognize, right? Maybe they saw a headline 10 years ago, or they scrolled past a documentary on Netflix. You see the prairie dresses, the high fences.
Like the image is there.
The image is there. But that label, cult leader, it gets thrown around so much in pop culture that I think we actually lose sight of the specific mechanics of what happened here.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we treat it like a horror movie villain, a caricature, rather than a real-world system of control. A machine.
And that is exactly the mission of this deep dive. We want to move past the sensational headlines, though trust me, the headlines are absolutely insane, and really try to understand the machinery.
How does this actually work?
Exactly. We have a stack of source material here that is, well, it's honestly overwhelming. We're looking at biography records. We have court transcripts from his sexual assault convictions, FBI fugitive data, and some really detailed histories of the FLDS church leadership.
And what we're looking for, I think, is the answer to a very, very disturbing question. How did a shy, premature baby, a guy who was essentially a wallflower, how did he grow up to accumulate 78 wives?
78.
78. And control over $100 million in assets, and this is the craziest part, continue to command a devoted following even from a life sentence in a Texas prison?
Those numbers alone. 78 wives. $100 million. It sounds like bad fiction. It really does. It sounds like something a writer would make up because it's just too exaggerated to be believable.
It does, but this isn't fiction. And honestly, it isn't just true crime either. This is a case study in absolute power. It's about the manipulation of faith and, the devastating impact that has on a closed community.
It's about taking away a person's autonomy, piece by piece.
And getting them to thank you for doing it, that's the part that's so chilling.
So, just to set the tone here, I'm probably going to be expressing a lot of disbelief today. The sheer scale of the fraud and the abuse.
Yeah.
It is genuinely hard to wrap your head around.
I get it.
But I want to start with the man himself. Because when you look at his mugshot, he doesn't look like a charismatic monster. He looks like an accountant who's disappointed in your tax returns.
He really does. He doesn't have that, Charles Manson crazy eyes energy.
Not at all.
And that right there is the most dangerous thing about him. He is the banality of evil personified. And to understand that transformation, we have to go back. We have to go back to the very beginning, because Warren Jeffs wasn't born a monster. In fact, his beginnings were incredibly fragile.
Okay, so the source material mentions he was born in Sacramento, California, December 3rd, 1955. But you flagged a specific medical detail as being important.
Yes, he was born more than 2 months premature. Now, in 2024, that's serious, but it's manageable. In 1955, that was a massive, massive medical hurdle. He was tiny. He was literally fighting for survival from his very first breath.
2 months early in the 50s. That definitely sets a tone for life, doesn't it?
It really does. He grew up outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. And by all accounts, he sort of retained that fragility. He wasn't the alpha male type. He wasn't the football captain or, the prom king.
He wasn't his father.
He was absolutely not his father. He was quiet. He was the runt of the litter, so to speak. And he grew up entirely in the shadow of his father, Rulon Jeffs, who was this larger-than-life, virile prophet figure.
That's a classic psychological setup, isn't it? The weak son trying to prove himself to the all-powerful father.
Exactly. It creates this massive complex. But here's where it gets interesting. Warren didn't try to compete on his father's terms. He didn't try to compete on charisma. He knew he couldn't outcharm people, so he found a different lane.
A different kind of power.
A different kind of power. So let's fast forward to 1976. He turns 21. And this is where we see the first real glimpse of the Warren Jeffs that would come later. He becomes the principal of Alta Academy.
Alta Academy. What was that?
It was the FLDS private school located at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon, and he served as the principal there for 20 years.
20 years. So before he was a prophet, he was a principal. That feels, I don't know, strangely fitting.
It is extremely fitting because of how he ran the school. The records, the testimony from former students, they don't describe him as an inspiring educator. They describe him as a stickler for rules and for discipline.
Oh, I can picture it now. The guy who's obsessed with the dress code, the exact time you show up. The guy who would, measure the length of your socks with a ruler.
Precisely. He was a bureaucrat of behavior. And if you really think about it, that is the perfect training ground for the kind of leadership he would eventually impose on the entire church.
It's a laboratory.
It's a laboratory. He learned that if you control the environment, the schedule, the clothes, the information people get, you control the person. He wasn't inspiring students. He was enforcing compliance.
So he spent 2 decades practicing mind control in 4th graders before he leveled up to controlling thousands of adults.
That is a terrifying, but I think a very accurate way to put it. And all the while, his father is running the show. Rulon Jeffs became the president of the FLDS in 1986, and he was known as Uncle Rulon.
Uncle Rulon. That sounds so benevolent.
It was meant to. He was seen as this loving patriarch. He had, I think, 19 or 20 wives and approximately 60 children.
60 children. Okay.
Right.
And Warren is just one of them.
Just one of many. But Warren positioned himself very carefully. He was the dutiful son, the one who handled the paperwork. He was the quiet administrator in the background. And prior to his father's death, Warren held the position of counselor to the church leader.
The gatekeeper.
The ultimate gatekeeper.
Which is such a powerful spot to be in. You control who gets to see the boss. You control the flow of information in and out.
Exactly. And as Rulon's health began to fail in his later years, Warren effectively became the voice of the prophet before he even held the title.
So he was speaking for him.
He would come out and say, "Father says this," or "Father wants this." And because Rulon was often too sick or too frail to contradict him, Warren's word became law. It was a de facto takeover.
That is a coup in slow motion.
It is a very patient, very deliberate coup. And then, when Rulon died in 2002, Warren ascended. He took the official title, President and Prophet, Seer and Revelator.
Prophet, seer, and revelator. It sounds so ancient. It sounds biblical.
It's a tradition carried on in the Latter-day Saint movement, and it implies a direct personal line to God. But here's where it gets really interesting and really messy. This wasn't a smooth transition. It wasn't like a royal coronation where everyone just bows and cheers.
There was drama.
Oh, there was massive drama. The succession caused a major split in the church. You see, not everyone bought into Warren. He was the strict principal, remember?
Not everyone's favorite.
Not everyone loved him, and there was a very influential man named Winston Blackmore. He was the bishop of the Bountiful British Columbia group of the FLDS.
So the Canadian branch.
The big Canadian branch, right. Blackmore had a huge following. He was charismatic in his own right. He was independent, and he had his own power base.
And Warren couldn't have that.
Warren couldn't have that. So when he took over, he didn't try to, bridge the gap or find a compromise. He went nuclear.
What do you do?
In September 2002, just a short time after taking power, Warren excommunicated Winston Blackmore.
Excommunicated, so just kicked him out entirely. Done.
Completely. You're out of the church, you are damned to hell. And this action caused more than half of the Canadian branch members to leave the FLDS church and stay with Blackmore.
Wow. So he was willing to just lose half the Canadian flock to ensure he had total unquestioning control.
That is the key takeaway. For Warren Jeffs, purity of obedience was more important than the number of followers, at least initially.
Consolidation.
It shows a ruthlessness that really defines his entire tenure. He would rather cut off a limb than let it disobey the brain. It was a corporate restructuring, but with eternal salvation at stake.
That's a chilling thought. He preferred a smaller kingdom where he was an absolute god rather than a larger one where he might have to answer some questions.
Exactly. And once he had that absolute control, his behavior, especially regarding his father's family, it took a really, really dark turn.
Okay, this is the part of the source material that it just made me physically recoil.
It's deeply disturbing. Upon taking power, Jeffs issued a directive to the high-ranking FLDS officials. He gathered them together and he said, quote, "I won't say much, but I will say this, hands off my father's wives."
Hands off my father's wives.
Mm.
Okay, so on the surface, to an outsider, that sounds respectful. Like he's saying, let the widows grieve, leave them alone.
You would think so. He even told the widows directly, "You women will live as if father is still alive and in the next room."
That is creepy on its own. Live as if he is in the next room.
Yeah.
That implies they're just frozen in time, like living ghosts.
But it was all a setup. It was a feint. The twist is that within a week of saying, "hands off," Warren Jeffs married all but 2 of his father's widows.
Wait. Within a week, he went from hands off to I do. He married his own stepmothers.
Yes. In Mormon fundamentalism, there's a historical concept similar to what's called levirate marriage, where a successor can marry the widows of the predecessor to, care for them. But Jeffs took this to an extreme speed and scale.
This wasn't about care.
This was about possession. It was about absorbing his father's power. It was like a pharaoh inheriting the previous pharaoh's harem.
It feels like he was just claiming his father's inventory.
That is exactly what it was. He was consolidating the spiritual lineage. Now, one widow did refuse to marry him.
Good for her. What happened?
Well, the consequence was that she was prohibited from ever marrying again within the community. She was effectively put on a shelf, spiritually and socially.
And the other one? You said all but 2.
Another one, a woman named Rebecca Wall, actually fled the FLDS compound to escape him. But the rest stayed. They had nowhere else to go.
And this included Naomi Jessup, right? I saw her name pop up a lot in the later sections of the court documents.
Yes, Naomi Jessup. She was one of Rulon's former wives. She didn't just become one of Warren's many wives. She became his favorite wife. She became his personal scribe. She was constantly by his side, recording his revelations in a notebook. She became a key enforcer of his will in her own right, a very powerful figure within the female hierarchy.
So he consolidates the leadership by kicking out the Canadian rival, and he consolidates the spiritual lineage by marrying his father's wives. It's like a hostile takeover of a religion.
It is a complete and total consolidation of power.
So what are the final numbers we're looking at here? Because I dropped the number 78 earlier, but
Yeah.
I really want to sit with that for a second.
According to former church members and evidence that was seized later in the raids, Warren Jeffs eventually had 78 wives.
78.
And more than 60 children.
I cannot even begin to fathom the logistics of that, let alone the morality. How do you justify that to your followers? How do you look another man in the eye, a man who can't find even one wife, and say, I need number 79?
To understand that, you have to look at the theology. This is absolutely crucial for understanding the why. Jeffs taught and reinforced the doctrine of plural marriage.
Plural marriage meaning polygamy.
Right. But it isn't just a lifestyle choice in their view. It is essential for exaltation.
Exaltation. That's getting into heaven.
Specifically, the highest degree of heaven, what they call the celestial kingdom. Jeffs taught that a devoted male church member is expected to have at least 3 wives in order to get into heaven.
3 is the minimum.
3 is the minimum for the average man to reach the highest level of glory. And the more wives a man has, the higher his status, the closer he is to God.
So it's a ladder. And he's built himself a ladder that goes to the moon.
Exactly. It frames his voracious appetite for marriage not as lust, but as spiritual superiority. The narrative becomes, look how holy I am. I have 78 wives. I am carrying the incredible burden of salvation for all of these women. It's a complete and total inversion of reality.
But his control wasn't just about marriage and theology, right?
Yeah.
You can't run an empire on prayers alone. You need leverage.
Yeah.
Real, tangible leverage.
That's right. And this is where the United Effort Plan comes in. The UEP.
Sounds so boring. The UEP. Like an accounting firm.
It sounds boring, but this boring-sounding acronym actually terrified people more than hellfire. The United Effort Plan was a trust. A charitable trust that held almost all the land and homes in Colorado City, Arizona, and Hilldale, Utah.
Those are the twin cities on the border where the FLDS is based, right? Short Creek.
That's the one. So if you lived there, you didn't own your house.
Wait, at all?
Not at all. You built the house. You paid for the materials out of your own pocket. You mowed the lawn. You fixed the roof. But the trust owned the land under it and the structure on top of it. And who controlled the trust?
Let me guess. Warren Jeffs.
Warren Jeffs. The value of this land, of this trust, was estimated at over $100 million.
$100 million. And because he controlled the trust, he could just kick people out.
Not just kick them out. He had the power to expel men and then reassign their wives, their children, and their homes to other men.
Reassign their families. I'm sorry, that is psychological terror. That's not religion. That's feudalism.
It is feudalism with a modern legal twist. I mean, just try to imagine this. Imagine knowing that if you displease the prophet, remember the stickler for rules, he doesn't just fire you from your job or yell at you.
Yeah.
He takes your home, the one you built. He exiles you to the secular world with nothing but the clothes on your back. And then he gives your wife and your kids to your neighbor.
Did he actually do this?
Yeah.
Or was it just a threat to keep people in line?
Oh, he absolutely did it. There's a famous incident from January 2004, a mass expulsion. He kicked out a group of 20 men from the Short Creek community.
20 men, all at once.
All at once. And get this group included the mayor of the town.
The mayor, the elected mayor.
The elected mayor of Colorado City. Jeffs expelled him and reassigned his wife and children to another man in the community.
So any semblance of secular or political power meant nothing compared to Jeffs' power.
It meant absolutely nothing. And what that action did was it sent a shockwave through the community. It stripped every other man of his security, of his identity. You were only a father or a husband for as long as Warren Jeffs allowed you to be. It turned every man in that community into a hostage.
Yeah, that explains why more people didn't speak up. If the mayor isn't safe, nobody is safe.
Exactly. Resistance meant total, complete erasure from the community.
That is the definition of a totalitarian regime,
Yeah.
just on a smaller scale. But eventually, this house of cards had to start attracting attention from law enforcement.
It did.
So, part 3, the crimes. Why did he have to go on the run? Because usually, authorities in the U.S. are pretty hesitant to get involved in religious disputes.
They are. The First Amendment provides a huge shield, and for a very long time, the authorities in Utah and Arizona basically turned a blind eye to the polygamy. They viewed it as a consenting adult issue, or just something too messy to prosecute.
But this wasn't just about consenting adults.
That was the problem.
No.
It wasn't just the polygamy, it was the widespread allegations of abuse involving minors. That's what changed the game.
Right. And this brings us to a name that appears really early in the legal battles. Brent Jeffs.
Brent Jeffs was Warren's own nephew. In July of 2004, he filed a civil lawsuit alleging that Warren had raped him repeatedly back in the late 80s.
And Brent was just a child then.
Brent was only 5 or 6 years old at the time of the alleged abuse. He later wrote a memoir called Lost Boy about this. His lawsuit was one of the first major cracks in the facade. It showed that the abuse wasn't just about spiritual marriages, it was raw predation.
The term lost boys,
Yeah.
it comes up a lot with the FLDS. Could we just unpack that for a second?
It's a really tragic demographic phenomenon. It refers to the teenage boys and young men who are expelled from the community.
Why? Why were they getting kicked out?
Well, think about the math again. If one man needs a minimum of 3 wives to get to heaven, and the prophet needs 78,
Yeah.
purely from a mathematical standpoint, you have a massive shortage of women or a massive surplus of men.
Right. The numbers don't work for everyone to be a polygamist. There aren't enough women to go around.
Exactly. So the leadership looks for reasons to kick young men out. They manufacture minor infractions, listening to rock music, wearing the wrong color shirt, talking to a girl without permission, and they expel them.
And what happens to them?
These boys, some as young as 13 or 14, are just dumped on the streets of St. George or Salt Lake City, often with no formal education, no money, and absolutely no social skills to survive in the outside world.
It's just ruthless math. You're getting rid of the competition for wives.
That's all it is. But while the Brent Jeffs lawsuit was a civil case, the case that really turned the tide criminally was the story of Alyssa Wall.
The Alyssa Wall case, that was the turning point.
It was the absolute turning point. In June of 2005, Warren Jeffs was formally charged in Arizona regarding the marriage of a 14-year-old girl, Alyssa Wall, to her 19-year-old first cousin, a man named Alan Steed.
14 years old.
Yes. And the details that came out in her testimony are just heartbreaking. She testified later that she begged Rulon Jeffs Warren's father, who was still alive at the time, to wait. She wasn't ready. She wanted to be older.
And what did Rulon say?
Apparently, Rulon was sympathetic. He actually put the marriage on hold. But when Rulon died and Warren took over, he was not sympathetic at all.
The stickler for rules.
He forced the marriage. He told her her salvation depended on it. He performed the ceremony himself. And Alyssa testified that she was raped by her new husband and suffered multiple miscarriages as a young teen.
And she eventually left.
She left, and her testimony provided the concrete evidence prosecutors needed. It showed that Jeffs wasn't just turning a blind eye to this stuff. He was the architect of the abuse. He was the one ordering the rape.
So the charges come down,
hmm
and Jeffs doesn't turn himself in. He doesn't lawyer up and fight it in court like you'd expect.
No, he vanishes. This is the beginning of what's called the fugitive years. In 2006, he goes on the run.
And this is when he hits the big list.
May 2006. The FBI officially places Warren Jeffs on its 10 most wanted fugitives list.
That is a huge escalation. That list is usually reserved for people who blow up federal buildings or kill federal agents.
It shows you how seriously they were finally taking this threat. They offered a reward, started at $60,000, which was soon raised to $100,000 for any information leading to his capture.
And the warning on the poster was pretty serious, too.
Yes, it was chilling. It said the public should be aware that he might travel with armed bodyguards.
So they viewed him as being actively dangerous.
Absolutely. They didn't know if the FLDS would go down fighting. There was a real, legitimate fear of a Waco-style standoff.
And during this time, while he's on the run, he's not just hiding in a hole somewhere.
No, not at all. Reports started to surface that he was still performing weddings. There were accounts of him holding marriage ceremonies for his followers in the back of mobile homes in remote locations, all while he was one of the most wanted men in America.
A mobile wedding chapel.
Essentially, he was trying to keep the machinery of the sect running from the shadows. He was traveling, hiding, but still issuing directives and controlling the lives of his followers.
Which brings us to part 4. The dragnet. Because you can't run forever, especially not when you're on the top 10 list. But the way he got caught, it wasn't some dramatic raid, was it?
The arrest is almost cinematic in its banality. After months of this intense manhunt, after the $100,000 reward, after law enforcement across multiple states were on high alert, he gets caught because of a license plate.
It's always the taillight or the license plate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Al Capone goes down for taxes. Warren Jeffs goes down for a traffic violation.
It really is. August 28th, 2006, around 9 p.m. on Interstate 15 in Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas. A state highway patrol trooper pulls over a red 2007 Cadillac Escalade.
A brand new Cadillac Escalade. Not exactly a low-profile vehicle for a fugitive trying to blend in.
No, and the reason for the stop was that the temporary license plates weren't visible, they were obstructed.
So he gets pulled over. Who is in the car with him?
Jeffs is in the car, along with his favorite wife, Naomi Jessup, and one of his brothers, Isaac Jeffs.
And when they search the car, the inventory list is just bizarre. I want to read some of this because it paints such a specific picture of his life on the run. It's like a fugitive starter kit, but weirder.
Please do. It's a fascinating glimpse into his psychology at that moment.
Okay, so first, they found $55,000 in cash.
Right. Your basic walking around money. You can't use credit cards when the feds are tracking you.
4 computers. And get this, 16 cell phones.
16 phones.
Why does one man need 16 phones? Was he trying to open his own Verizon store?
Burner phones. Compartmentalization. This is the deep dive insight right here. Those 16 phones prove he wasn't just sitting in the passenger seat looking at the scenery. He was actively administering the church from the road.
He was running the whole show from his car.
Think about it. He probably had one phone for his lawyers, one for the construction projects he was still overseeing, one for the land trust, and then separate phones for different wives or different cells of followers.
So he was micromanaging a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise and a religious sect from the dashboard of a Cadillac.
Exactly. He couldn't let go of that control, even for a second.
And then, my favorite part, the disguises. 3 wigs and 12 pairs of sunglasses.
It's almost comical, isn't it? The prophet of God, the man who holds the keys to eternity for thousands of people, needing a cheap wig from a costume shop to buy gas.
It completely undercuts the divine protection narrative, doesn't it? If God is protecting you, why do you need 12 pairs of sunglasses? Why do you need to look like a bad undercover cop from a 70s TV show?
That is the ultimate irony. He preached that the outside world was evil and that faith was the only shield you needed. But when he was in danger, he relied on cash, technology, and disguises.
So they catch him. The prophet is in cuffs. Now begins part 5, the legal roller coaster. Because it wasn't a straight line from that traffic stop to prison, was it?
No, it was incredibly frustrating for the victims and for the public. The first big trial was in Utah in 2007.
And this was for the Alyssa Wall case.
Yes. Specifically, the charge was accomplice to rape. The legal argument was that by forcing the marriage of a minor, he was an accomplice to the rape that inevitably followed.
And the verdict on that one?
Guilty. He was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years to life in prison.
Okay, so justice served. He's done. Case closed.
For a moment, it seemed that way. But in 2010, the Utah Supreme Court overturned the conviction.
You're kidding me. Why? On what grounds?
Legal technicalities, essentially. They ruled there were flawed jury instructions. The court said that the judge hadn't sufficiently proven to the jury that Jeffs intended for the rape to happen, only that it did happen as a result of his actions.
That feels like such a legal hair split.
Yeah.
He forced a 14-year-old girl to marry a man against her will. What on earth did he think was going to happen?
Exactly. It was a massive, massive blow to the victims. It really felt like he was going to slip away again. But while that legal drama was playing out, something else happened in 2008 that changed everything.
The Texas raid.
The Texas raid. The Yearning for Zion Ranch, or YFZ Ranch, in El Dorado, Texas.
Oh, I remember this. The images were everywhere. The women in the pastel pioneer dresses, the crying children being taken away.
It was a huge media event. Jeffs had built this massive compound there. He bought the land quietly, built a giant temple, and moved hundreds of his most loyal followers to this isolated spot. In April 2008, authorities raided it and took custody of 416 children.
416. This is all based on a single phone call.
Right. It was a call to a domestic violence hotline from someone claiming to be an abused 16-year-old girl inside the compound. But here's a crazy twist. The call was a hoax.
A hoax. The whole thing.
The call was eventually traced to a woman named Rosita Swinton in Colorado Springs, who had absolutely nothing to do with the FLDS. She was a serial hoaxer who apparently got some kind of thrill from creating chaos.
So the biggest child custody raid in Texas history was based on a complete lie.
The catalyst was a lie. But what they found when they got there was very real. Even though the initial call was fake, the raid and the subsequent investigation into the ranch exposed the lifestyle. They found records, they found pregnant teenagers, they found DNA evidence connecting older men to underage girls.
So the hoax accidentally uncovered the truth.
In a way, yes, it was a chaotic legal mess, and many of the children were eventually returned to their parents because the state couldn't prove imminent danger for all of them individually. But the evidence they gathered led to real, solid charges in Texas against Jeffs and other leaders.
And that led to the big one, the Texas conviction in 2011.
This was the trial that finally stuck. Jeffs was extradited to Texas, and the charges were much more direct this time. Sexual assault of a child and aggravated sexual assault, specifically for raping a 12-year-old bride and a 15-year-old bride.
12 and 15. It makes your stomach turn.
It does. And in this trial, Jeffs did something very strange. He fired his lawyers. He decided to represent himself for a portion of it.
What? Why would he do that?
He spent hours just preaching to the jury, reading from scripture. It was less a legal defense and more an attempt to either convert them or bore them into submission.
The principal trying to lecture the courtroom into acquitting him?
It did not work. The DNA evidence was undeniable. The testimony from the victims was powerful. The jury had no doubts this time. Verdict: guilty on both counts.
And what was the sentence?
Life in prison plus 20 years.
Life plus 20. And parole.
He is not eligible for parole until July 22, 2038. He will be in his 80s.
So effectively a life sentence. He's never getting out.
Yes. He is currently locked up at the Louis C. Pallage unit in Palestine, Texas.
So case closed. Evil man goes to jail, the cult disbands, everyone goes home and lives happily ever after.
You would hope so. But this brings us to the really strange final act. Part 6, Prison Prophet. Because locking him up didn't shut him up. In fact, in some ways, it made him even more dangerous to his followers.
This is the part that just fascinates me. How do you lead a church from a maximum security prison? And frankly, how is he even still alive? I read about multiple suicide attempts.
He has had a very tumultuous time in custody. In 2007, while in a Utah jail, he tried to hang himself with a sock. He's gone on repeated hunger strikes for what he calls spiritual reasons.
Fasting.
Extreme fasting.
Yeah.
To the point that in 2011, he was actually placed in a medically induced coma because he had fasted so much he was near death.
Is that genuine religious fervor? Or is that just another manipulation tactic? You know, look at me, suffering for all of you.
That is the million-dollar question. It certainly galvanizes his followers. They see his suffering as proof of his martyrdom. The evil world is punishing him just like they punished Jesus. But then you have these moments of, well, flip-flopping.
What do you mean?
In 2007, there was a recorded jailhouse conversation with his brother Nephi, where Warren seemingly renounced his prophethood entirely.
Really, he said, I'm not the prophet.
He went much further. He said on the recording that he was the greatest of all sinners. He said God had never called him to be a prophet. He sounded completely broken.
Whoa. That's a confession. That should have been the end of the whole thing right there.
You would think so, but his lawyers and the church leadership, still loyal to him, immediately jumped in and spun it. They claimed he misspoke, or that he was being tested by the devil, or that he was just exhausted and delirious.
He gaslit everyone.
And then by 2011, Jeffs had retaken legal control of the church from prison and acted as if that conversation never even happened.
Misspoke.
Yeah, whoa.
Oops, I accidentally said I wasn't God's chosen prophet. That is some next-level gaslighting.
It shows the manipulation isn't just directed at the followers, it's directed at the legal system too. And even from prison, he kept issuing these grand prophecies. In late 2012, he predicted the world would end before 2013.
Well, spoiler alert. The world is still here.
It is. But imagine the terror for his followers. They're selling possessions, they're prepping for the apocalypse because the man in the cell said so. He even managed to release a book in 2012.
A book? How on earth did he get a book published from a Texas prison?
Through his FLDS network. It was titled Jesus Christ Message to All Nations. It contained, directives to free him and warnings to nations that they would be destroyed.
But the backstory of that book is even sketchier, right?
Oh, much sketchier. Federal prosecutors later stated that the publication was financed by $250,000.
That's a lot of money. Where did it come from?
Defrauded food stamp and welfare money.
You're kidding me. Welfare money.
Yes. The feds prosecuted a massive food stamp fraud ring where FLDS members would use their benefits at church-owned stores, get a fraction of the value in goods, and the church would pocket the cash difference. That cash was then laundered and used for things like publishing the Prophet's book.
So the American taxpayers essentially subsidized the publication of his apocalyptic manifesto. That makes me so angry. The system that he rejects, the beast, as they call the outside world, is the very system he exploits.
That is the great paradox of the FLDS under Jeffs. They hate the government, but they will bleed it dry for resources. They have a term for it. Bleeding the beast. They view it as righteous theft.
And what's his mental state now? Is he still trying to run things from his cell?
It's murky. In 2019, there was a civil suit against the church, and Jeffs allegedly suffered a complete mental breakdown. He was officially deemed unfit to give a deposition.
Unfit to testify.
His attorneys and the attorneys for the UEP Trust argued that forcing him to testify would be futile because of his mental state.
Do we buy that? Or is it another act? I'm too crazy to testify, but I'm still sane enough to be the prophet for my people.
Expert speculation and the opinion of many former members leans towards it being another convenient legal strategy. If he testifies, he might perjure himself or admit to more crimes. Being declared unfit keeps him silent and protects the church's ongoing legal and financial liability. It's always, always calculated.
Okay, so let's look at the last part here. Part 7, current status and legacy. Where does the FLDS stand today? The man is locked away for good. Has the spell finally broken?
It is fractured, but it is not dead. Many, many members still consider him the prophet. They believe he is a martyr, suffering in prison like the prophets of old. They have pictures of him in their homes. His words are still read as scripture.
So in a twisted way, the conviction actually strengthened their faith.
For the hardcore believers, yes. Persecution validates their worldview. It proves them right. The world hates us because we have the truth.
What about the land, the UEP? That was his biggest, most tangible weapon.
That is one of the bright spots in this whole story. The UEP land was taken over by the state courts of Utah and Arizona and reformed. It is now largely controlled by a community board made up of former members and independent fiduciaries, not Jeffs.
So he lost control of the real estate?
He lost control of the real estate.
Yeah.
And they are trying to privatize the homes to give people the actual deeds to the houses they build, which breaks that cycle of leverage Jeffs had.
That is huge. Giving people the deed to their own house.
Yeah.
That breaks the back of his power.
Exactly. It removes the threat of eviction. It gives them economic independence and a path out if they choose to take it. But the ideological damage, that is so much harder to fix.
Right.
We have to remember Jeffs' other views. He didn't just preach polygamy. He vehemently condemned interracial marriage.
I saw that in the source material. He called it evil.
He described black people as being under the curse of Cain, a doctrine the mainstream Mormon church disavowed decades ago. And he condemned homosexuality, calling it an evil as great as murder.
So it's a hateful, racist, homophobic ideology wrapped up in this religious language.
Yes. And that legacy lives on in the minds of the people who were raised in it. Even if they leave, they have to unlearn years and years of that kind of hate and fear. The tragic legacy is the lost boys, who have no education and no family, the young brides who are traumatized, the fractured community in Short Creek.
It's a mess that will take generations to clean up.
It will, absolutely.
So let's try and wrap this all up. We've unpacked the man, the crimes, and the system he built. What's the big summary here?
I think Warren Jeffs represents this unique and frankly terrifying intersection of American religious freedom and criminal tyranny. He uses the protections of faith, the fact that we as a society hesitate to interfere with churches to build a personal empire of abuse.
He weaponized everything.
He weaponized marriage, he weaponized housing, and most of all, he weaponized fear. Fear of hell and fear of being kicked out with nothing.
And the takeaway for us, for people listening to this,
the deep dive takeaway, I think, is that while Jeffs himself is locked away, the ideology and the damage to these families persists. It serves as a profound warning about unquestioned authority. When one person holds the keys to your home, your family, and your eternal salvation, that is a recipe for absolute disaster. Isolationism allows this kind of abuse to fester in the dark.
it really does. And here's a provocative thought to leave you with. If Warren Jeffs managed to run his entire sect from the back of a Cadillac while on the run, and he managed to publish books from a maximum security prison cell, does locking up the leader actually kill the cult? Or does it just give them a martyr?
Does the cage make the bird sing louder for its followers?
That's the scary question.
The body is in a cell in Texas, but the voice is still in their heads.
On that rather uplifting note,
Yeah.
seriously though, if you want to understand the money trail behind all of this, look up the history of the United Effort Plan Trust. It is a legal and financial rabbit hole of its own.
Absolutely. Always follow the money.
Thanks for diving in with us. Until next time.
Stay curious.